Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Star Wars Rebels Season 3. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review every episode of Star Wars Rebels one season at a time. In this latest video, I will cover all the episodes of Season 3 of Star Wars Rebels. So, I don't know. I kind of think that Season 3 of Rebels was just as good as Season 2, really. Just a different flavor. It didn't, like, blow me away or anything. I think Season 2 had Darth Vader and Ahsoka, and Season 3 did not, which is a knock against it in my opinion. But Season 3 did introduce us to Grand Admiral Thrawn, who was apparently taken straight from the novels and whatnot, and the video games, and apparently all that had been decanonized, but they kept him anyway. So I'm sure all the fans of the extended lore were thrilled about that, where I personally actually never read any of that stuff, so I didn't really care either way. But he was a good character for this season, I will say. And it is interesting that they played with the power dynamics a bit. Ezra's a bit older, taking on more responsibility. Kanan was now pretty much blind, but can kind of see through the Force. But he's not as active as he once was. And then Sabine even leaves the group towards the end of the season to go back to Mandalore. So it changes things up a bit. It gets more involved with the overall rebellion, showing the roots of the rebellion more so than the previous seasons has, like as particularly Season 1, which was a lot more focused on just this one tiny band of 5 or 6 rebels, where here Season 2 expanded it more and Season 3 expands it even more. So that's a good thing. But yeah, overall, I think it's a good season. I don't think it's like this huge improvement over Season 2, though. I think it's just as good, but in a different way. Alright, so we'll go ahead and get started with the first pair of episodes. Step into the Shadow, Part 1 and 2. I'll review both parts at the same time. Yeah, this is when Ezra starts commanding missions, and he goes in a couple successful ones, so he's given this other mission to retrieve these ships, but then he gets a bit cocky and ends up like fucking up, and when people try to point out, hey, maybe it's not a good idea, he's like, shut up, we'll do it anyway, because it was supposed to do just like a recon mission, but they find out that if they don't try to take the ships right then they'll never get the chance to do it. So it's a risk, and if the plot would require it, then the risk would have paid off, but the plot particularly required this risk not to pay off, because the point was to show that Ezra is being cocky. But we also get a plot where Kanan goes into the desert of this, the chopper base apparently is the setting for this whole season, which I thought was pretty interesting. I still feel like the other droid found the base, not Chopper, but whatever. And so he goes around, out in the desert and finds this Force wielder who's neither Jedi nor Sith. He's like this giant ox-looking thingy, who's very powerful, and he's the one that teaches Kanan to see, even though he's blind, to use the Force to see or whatever. Which I was kind of meh on that storyline. It seems a bit cliche, like this mysterious mentor figure who knows everything about the Force or whatever. I don't know. I mean, but it's a cartoon, so hey, it works for that. And so when Ezra's in trouble because his cockiness got him in trouble and him and his group almost got killed, so when Kanan shows up to save the day and manages to rescue them. So these were interesting episodes. Not a bad way to start the season, but nothing that blew me away. So anyway, we'll get into the next episode, the Holocrons of Sage. Dun, dun, dun. So this one, they bring back Darth Maul, who has his the Sith holocron, but then Ezra has the Jedi holocron, and so he tries to trick him to bring the holocrons together, and they consult that ox dude in the desert and he's like, oh, weird powerful things, if you put the two holocrons together it's gonna like destroy the world or universe or some shit, I don't know. So I like Darth Maul. As I said, like in the Phantom Menace, he was just like a nothing minion character, but what the Clone Wars and Rebels did with him, they made him way more interesting. I do like the way that he's portrayed. He's a very interesting, devious villain. And I think this episode makes very good use of him. I believe this is, he takes the Ghost crew hostage to force Ezra to come and put the two holocrons together, and then he tries to kill Kanan, blowing him out in space, and he does the fucking Leia Mary Poppins thing. And I believe this season did come out after Force Awakens. No, but before The Last Jedi. I believe it was before The Last Jedi, so he did the Mary Poppins thing before Leia did. So I don't know. I never complained about that so much. Everyone seemed to make a big deal and think it was the worst thing ever. It makes sense to me. You can use if you're in space, you can use the Force to pull yourself back in the ship. I don't know. And plus, we needed to see Leia using the Force, because what the fucking point of her being a Skywalker and son of Darth Vader? She's never going to use the Force. But anyway, I'm not talking about The Last Jedi. So this is a really good episode. I really liked it. I liked the use of Darth Maul, and I thought it was very suspenseful. So this one I did like a lot. So next episode is the Antilles Extraction. Sabine goes undercover as a cadet at the Empire Academy. I mean, didn't we already fucking do this? In fact, they did reference that in this episode. They're like, oh, Ezra did that last time, so now it's Sabine's turn to do it. I mean, just because you reference the thing that you're doing again doesn't negate the fact that you're doing the same story again. That's basically it. But then they say, oh, at the end there's like, guess what, one of the cadets that Sabine saved was Wedge Antilles. Da 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 da. Wedge, he was that one guy who had like a couple lines. Good shot, Rogue 2. Remember him? God, some fanboys, they have to like play it out. Oh, it's Wedge! Yeah, who cares? I didn't really like this episode. I thought it was just a repeat of what they did already. Anyway, we'll get into the next episode, which is Heras Heroes. You get it? Instead of Hogan's Heroes. There you go. Anyway, this again, I think, is kind of a lesser version of the episode they did in the previous season, where she goes to help her family and her father. And this time they're not, trying to fight each other like they did last time. This time they're on the same side, but the Empire is taking over their ancestral home, and there's like a item that's of very cultural importance to Hera and her family, and she's trying to retrieve it, but she ends up giving it up in order to stick a thorn in the Empire's side. So it was decent. It was okay. I still think it's not as good as the previous one they did in earlier seasons. So the next episode after that is The Last Battle. This is an interesting tie back to the Clone Wars, where and it does showcase the difference between the Separatists and the Empire, and how the Separatists aren't like straight up evil the way the Empire is. And because there's these androids and battle droids that are still, they want to recreate the freaking Clone Wars, and since Rex is there and he's having the flashbacks, but it takes like Ezra and Kanan to be like, hey, Clone Wars are actually over, and at the end they both team up together to defeat the Empire. I actually didn't like this one. I thought it was a bit cheesy, even though I do like the callback to the Clone Wars. Most of the episode was just, the droids being obtuse and trying to fight them, recreate the battle for no reason, and then all of a sudden at the end it's like, hey, okay, fine, let's team up for the Empire. I don't know. Didn't really work for me. So the next episode after that is Imperial Super Commandos, where they deal with that dude. What was his name? The dude who was from Mandalore, who was a dick and betrayed them last season, and he's in prison, and he's being a dick and trying to escape and shit and take him back to Mandalore. But then he realizes that the group who isn't in control of Mandalore are, shrills for the Empire, and they all try to kill him. And Ezra and Sabine help him get out of it, and he realizes that, hey, maybe rebels aren't so bad after all, which I liked. I think that was actually really well earned. This episode did really work for me. I kind of liked this whole Mandalore plot. Now, it is interesting coming back and watching Clone Wars and Rebels after seeing The Mandalorian, because when The Mandalorian first came out, people were like, who'd seen these two shows already had all this background information on The Mandalorian, where I was like, what the fuck is a Mandalorian? What the fuck is a Lami? So I when that show first came out, so it's interesting going back and getting all this backstory, and it's probably one of the more interesting through storylines throughout the whole show. So anyway, we'll get into the next episode, which is Iron Squadron. This episode was dumb. I did not like it. It does really showcase that this is a cartoon that I'm watching, which I know it's a cartoon that I'm watching, but a lot of these episodes supersede that and actually better than just a kid's cartoon, where this is just a kids cartoon episode where there's a group of kids who are like fighting the Empire, and they're like, we're better than you, and it just happens to be Sato's nephew or some shit, and they're all very arrogant and won't listen to reason, and they're trying to get themselves killed, and I don't know. I just had no time for this episode. Anyway, next one is the Wakathu job. Yeah, and I know I pronounced that wrong, but what do you want from me? Anyway, so my good friend Hondo returns, which has, I mentioned in previous videos, not a big fan of him, but he was okay in this episode. But then he's like, oh, I teamed up with this guy, and they're like, oh my god, not that guy, and I was like, I think I remember that guy. He's been in a couple episodes. Wasn't he in that one with Lando or something? He's got like a squid for a face, and he tried to sell Hero for some reason, or buy her or something. And I don't know, what do I care about that guy? And then that guy disappears, and Hondo all of a sudden decides to betray him, because he's Hondo. And they're my friends. It's just, I don't care about that episode. Anyway, next episode is an Inside Man, where they go back to Lothal, and we get Clancy Brown again. That's the name of his character, and we get Clancy Brown, and they're working in the factory, and this was actually a really dark episode. This superseded being a cartoon. This does not feel like a kid's cartoon, where Thrawn showed up and was because the Clancy Brown and his friends were purposely sabotaging the equipment that they were building at the Imperial factory. So then Thrawn shows up and forces the workers to test the equipment that they make, and knowing that it's going to kill them because they sabotaged it, and he knows for a fact he just wants to call out, and that was some really dark shit. And I thought it was like a really good episode too, and how it just makes it to me. Yeah, I love the episodes that supersede being a kids cartoon, and it could be a live action, normal adult Star Wars episode for all you know of any show. So yeah, and they had to, Kanan and Ezra had to come in and act like stormtroopers and try to help the workers out and get them rid of this situation. It was really intense, so I really liked this one. So, next episode is Visions and Voices. This has got one of my favorite moments because Ezra keeps seeing Darth Maul, and everyone's like, what? Darth Maul's not there. What are you talking about? There's no Darth Maul. And then they go see that giant ox dude in the desert, and he's like, well, what do you want, Ezra? And he's like, I want to stop seeing Maul. And the dude's like, well, you better not turn around then. Because Maul was actually standing right behind him. I fucking love that moment. Oh, that was so cool. And I think it's dumb, though, how Maul calls Ezra his apprentice. My apprentice. You know for the fact he's not your fucking apprentice. But anyway, that was a cool episode. And then they had this other thing where they Maul tricks him to go to this place where they have the witches from the Clone Wars, is like their spirits or whatever, and they inhabit Sabine and Kanan, and Ezra has to try to free them from it, which is really intense. So really like this one, really good one. So next, we get another two-parter, Ghosts of Geonosis. This features Saw Gerrera. Now, I do believe, if I'm checking the dates on this correctly, this season came out after Rogue One came out. So Saw Gerrera previous appearances was just in the episode of the 4 episodes of Clone Wars where he was much, much younger, and then Rogue One. And so this is supposed to be taking place before Rogue One, obviously, because he died at the end of Rogue One, and this is taking place before the Star Wars original trilogy, and Rogue One was right before it. But it's obvious that they modeled this version of Saw Gerrera after Forrest Whitaker. I think that was pretty obvious to me. So it makes sense that this came out after Rogue One, but it shows like an earlier version of him. But it's interesting because it shows how sort of fucked up his time in Clone Wars affected him, like seeing his sister die, and Rex mentions that several times, and how there's this poor Geonosis who's obviously just trying to protect, has his egg, and trying to protect the rest of his species because they're about to become extinct, and he's trying to save it, but the Saw Gerrera is keep being a fucking dick to him while Ezra tries to stick up for him, and then the Empire comes, and the ship has to burrow underground, and the Empire is looming over them, and threatening to bombard them. It's really intense. It's really good stuff, and I do like how in the end Saw Gerrera grows a bit and lets the Geonosis go so he can save his species. So yeah, it's a powerful two-parter that really worked, and really enjoyed it. So next episode is Warhead. This one felt kind of like a waste of time to me. I mean, I guess it was kind of cool to see Zeb and Chopper have their own excellent adventure because they were left at Chopper Base while everyone fucked off to do something important, I guess. And we focus on Zeb, who's kind of a moron. He finds this droid out in the desert and is like, oh, let's just bring it back to the base. And Chopper's like, no, don't fucking do that. And, well, of course he says in his Chopper way, he goes, rah, 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 but you can tell what he's saying. And Zeb's like, nah, I'll be fine. And then it turns out being this is like badass Imperial probe that is like also ultimate weapon, tries to kill them all. And so proves that Zeb was a moron after all, but they managed to overpower it. So it was a decent episode. Anyway, next episode is Trials of the Dark Saber, and this is when they decide to that Mandalorian dude who was a prisoner but is now on their side, because he thinks the rebels are cool now. Comes up with the idea to make Sabine the new savior of Mandalore and try to get her to free Mandalore from the Empire using the Dark Saber. Now this is because this I remember when I first saw the Mandalorian season 1. At the end of it, they showed Gus Fring or Darth. What's his name? Not Darth. Is it Darth? I don't know. Moff Gideon. Showed him with the Dark Saber, and I know all the Star Wars fans and geeks were going crazy, like, oh my god, it's the Dark Saber. I'm like, what the fuck is that thing? It looks stupid. I didn't catch the reference at all. And so now we're getting more of a backstory of it, for me anyway. And then they just mentioned briefly how, in the next episode when she returns to Mandalore, they mention how she has to win the Dark Saber in battle for it to be truly hers, and she didn't, which is something that was more importantly mentioned in season 2 of the Mandalorian. But I have a feeling this is going to come up even more in season 4 of Rebels, so I'll wait to see that. But anyway, I really liked this episode because I thought it was a really powerful character story for Sabine, because it was all about Kanan and Ezra trying to train her to use the saber, but they couldn't. They ultimately, decided that they couldn't train her to be a Jedi. That because she's not a Jedi, she's a Mandalorian, and so she would handle it a bit differently than a Jedi would. But she still needs to be proficient in the use of a lightsaber. And I like how they really point out that the lightsaber requires force wielding, and it's not simply just using a sword. There's much more to it than that, which I think does a lot to build the lore of Star Wars overall. And I thought it was a great character story for Sabine, and how she, was butting heads with Kanan and eventually had to admit why she was resistant to return to Mandalore, and how she felt abandoned by her family. Very powerful scene. So I really, really liked this episode. And the follow-up episode to that was Legacy of Mandalore, which also really loved, where she actually did come home to confront her family, and her family kept trying to betray her to the Empire, because their family had lost a lot of status because of her, because, the rebellion seen as evil or whatever. And then but the Empire shrills kept being dicks to them, and eventually was going to kill their family anyway, even though they were trying to help them. So finally, her family decided to rebel against them, and they had this epic fight between Sabine and that dude. I think the dude stole the Dark Saber, and she was using Ezra's lightsaber, if I remember correctly, or something like that. But yeah, it was, and so this time she did win it in battle. So there we go. So now she did win the Dark Saber in battle, I believe. I haven't seen the follow-up to this yet, but that's what it appears to me, by defeating that one dude. So yeah, this was a very powerful episode too. Really enjoyed this one as well. So next episode after that is Through Imperial Eyes, which is very interesting. So we had this ongoing storyline all season about fulcrum, a spy that was feeding the rebellion information. And in the previous episode, we learned that spy is in fact Callus, the dude who I thought was a shitty villain in the first 2 seasons. But then they had that enemy mind episode when he was trapped on the planet with Zeb and he made friends with Zeb, and apparently that led to him realizing that he should betray the Empire and help the rebellion, which I actually like. I think this made him a way more interesting character. As I said, I didn't really care about him in the first 2 seasons. It just seemed like a generic villain, bad guy, that guy. But, now making him this like double agent spy made him way more interesting. And so in this episode, it follows his perspective of basically being outed, and Ezra comes to rescue him, but then there's this whole ordeal and he tries to blame this other dude for being a spy, and then eventually he decides to stay on the ship because he thinks that he's correctly convinced Thrawn and the others that other dude was the spy. But unbeknownst to him, Thrawn knows that he was in fact a spy, and so staying behind was actually a really bad decision. So that was a powerful episode. Really liked that one. Next episode is Secret Cargo, where they're transporting. They start the episode by mentioning, God, what's her face? The one who was in Return of the Jedi, who was like the leader of the rebellion. And she's a senator here who's rejected the Empire and speaks out publicly against them. Mon Mothma. That's how you say it, yeah. Anywho, so they mention her at the start of the episode, and then the ghosts meet up with this other rebel ship to transport this mysterious cargo, which you don't know what it is, which is fucking obvious. It's Mon Mothma. I mean, come on, it's so obvious. But anyway, they transport to save her, try to get her to this meeting or whatever, while the Empire is trying to kill them. So it's a decent episode. I thought it was okay. Next episode is Double Agent Droid, which is where Chopper and AP5 try to infiltrate this base to steal this information, but there's these Imperial hacker team, whatever, that catch on to what they're doing, and they hack Chopper and control him, and thus turn him evil. I kind of like this one. I like how Chopper is being nice to everyone, and everyone's and I think that Wedge is being a moron in this episode. That is fucking obvious that something's wrong, and AP5 can tell that something's wrong, but no one fucking listens to him until they realize that. I thought it was powerful at the end where Hera was like, "Give me my droid back," and was using Chopper to fight back against those other Imperial dudes, the hacker team or whatever. So I actually kind of like this one. I thought it was pretty good. So next episode is Twin Sons, which I thought was a pretty good episode. I see that it's one of the highest rated episodes on IMDb. I don't think I'd say it's that good, honestly. But I still really liked this episode. It was great. Maul was tricking Ezra to go to Tatooine because he couldn't find Obi-Wan Kenobi, because that's the information. Apparently Obi-Wan, they revealed Darth Maul's whole motivation of putting holocrons together is to find Obi-Wan to get his revenge, whereas Ezra was shown that Obi-Wan is the key to defeating the Empire, which I suppose in a long-winded way you could say he was, because Obi-Wan was protecting Luke and was the one who guided Luke, and without Luke he would have turned Anakin back to the light side, which is what defeated the Empire. So in a roundabout way, knowing what we know what's going to happen, that's true. So Ezra goes and apparently it was just a trick for Maul to find Obi-Wan, and then Maul finds Obi-Wan, and they have an epic fight, and Obi-Wan kills Darth Maul. Now, I haven't seen last season of Rebels yet, so I don't know if Maul is indeed dead, and if he is indeed dead, this happened rather quickly. And of course, Maul's been killed before, and it apparently means nothing. But that, yeah, it did happen rather quickly. But I do kind of like how Obi-Wan was, like, the confrontation between them. Obi-Wan was being very calm, collective, and you're a servant of evil, Darth, and kind of like seeing the whole perspective where Darth Maul was just like, well, he's not Darth anymore, but Maul was just being very, angry and controlled by the need for revenge and rage, and Obi-Wan was able to use that against him and defeat him, which was good. And it was also interesting how he knew who Ezra was, and it was like, you don't need to be here. And he's refusing to help with the rebellion, which really confuses Ezra. But I think I think Maul's the one who puts together that Obi-Wan is looking over someone and protecting him, and so that's when Obi-Wan has to kill him. But yeah, so it's a good episode. I liked it. Maybe not as great as everyone else probably went crazy over it because, it's Obi-Wan, but it was good. I liked it. Anyway, next episode is the 2-part finale, 0 Hour, Part 1 and 2. So this is a big 2-parter where the Rebellion was planning this whole attack on Lothal to free Lothal. However, Thrawn is able to use that information and the stuff that he, of course, been monitoring Kallus, who is, Fulcrum, and he uses that information to discover the location of Chopper Base and mounts an attack on the base with overwhelming forces before the rebellion can leave. So it's pretty intense. Kanan goes out into the desert to get help from that force-wielding Ox guy, but he doesn't want to help because he's not a Jedi and he's not a Sith, and he doesn't want to take sides. But Kanan decides to piss him the fuck off, so he comes in and starts like fucking shit up in the next episode for both of them, and he's like, Heras like, I thought he was your friend, and he's like, oh, I guess not. But meanwhile, Ezra tries to, he runs the blockade and escapes it to try to get help, and the rest of the rebellion is like, nah, fuck that, because that's what they want. They want us to show our forces to go help you so they can wipe us out in one fell swoop, so we're not going to fall into their trap. Which you can kind of see the point of view, but meanwhile, everyone who's trapped on Chopper Base is going to die, so he goes to Sabine for help, and they decide to go and help them and come up with an ingenious plan to disrupt the blockade. And there's also, of course, Sato had to sacrifice himself, his whole ship, for Ezra to get out in the first place. So that was a death of a pretty important character. So that was pretty exciting. And then, of course, Thrawn is having his ground forces on Chopper Base trying to attack the base, and it looks like they have them surrounded, but that's when the Ox dude shows up. So they just managed to get out, but it seems like a lot of them died in this evacuation, but some of the rebels managed to make it out alive. So so it was pretty intense. It kind of showed the rebellion, of course, did endure, but it suffered a lot of losses, and it really showcased I love how great of a strategist Thrawn is. And of course he was captured and tortured the Kallus guy, but Kallus manages to escape at the end of the episode and joins up with the Ghost. So I wonder if he's going to be part of the crew next season. I don't know. I'll have to wait and see. But yeah, pretty intense episode. Great way to end the season. So yeah. So now, that's all the episodes of Season 3 of Star Wars Rebels. So now we'll get into my favorite and least favorite episodes of the season. As for least favorite episode, I suppose The Last Battle wasn't that good. Neither was the Winkathru job. I'm not a huge fan of Hondo. But for my least favorite episode, I definitely have to say Iron Squadron. This is my least favorite episode, the one with the kids being all cocky, like, we could take on the Empire. I don't really like these cartoonish shows in my Star Wars cartoons. Anyway, yes, I know what I just said. Anyway, as for best episode of the season, the Holocrons of Fate, was really good, as were the Imperial Commandos, dealing with Mandalore. Ghost of Geonosis with Saw Gerrera, that was pretty cool too. And Through the Eyes of the Empire, seeing Callus's perspective. And actually Double Agent Droid, which apparently was really low rated on IMDb. The one when they took over Chopper. I actually kind of liked that one. I also liked the one with Obi-Wan, Twin Sons, and the 2-part finale, 0 Hour Parts 1 and 2. Those are all really good. But I'll have to say best episode of the season. Well, the runner-up to that would be Legacy of Mandalore, but the best episode of the season would be the first part of that 2-parter, Trials of the Dark Saber. Yeah, I just thought this was a really powerful episode, character piece for Sabine. It really helped flesh out the lore of Star Wars overall, and just building on the whole Mandalore thing, I thought was really cool. So that was my favorite episode of the season. So as for my rating for Star Wars Rebels Season 3 out of 10, I'm going to give this one, I can't remember what I gave Season 2, but I'm going to give this one an 8. Extremely good. I think there was definitely more bad than good. The season didn't quite blow me away, but I still enjoyed it. It had a pretty strong start and pretty strong end, and the Mandalore stuff was really cool. The Maul stuff was really cool. But again, as I said, there was no Darth Vader and no Ahsoka, which kind of disappointed me. And it had a couple of silly episodes like this. The ones with the stupid kids and the ones with the stupid droids from Clone Wars or whatever. But overall, pretty good, pretty effective season. So that's it for my review of Star Wars Rebels Season 3. I shall be back next month to cover the final season of Rebels Season 4. So be sure to check out my channel for that. Also, as I cover many other shows, like all kinds of Star Trek videos, all things Star Trek, as I say, and other shows like Westworld, Better Call Saul, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.